Welcome back to the Public Works Podcast, where we shine a light on the people who make our communities work, the engineers, the leaders, the innovators, driving the future of infrastructure and public service. I'm your host, Shane Silsby. Today's episode is one I'm really excited about. We're sitting down with Rossana D'Antonio, former Deputy Director of Los Angeles County Public Works. That is one of the largest and most complex public works agencies in the nation. Rossana's leadership has shaped the lives of millions across Southern California through her commitment to innovation, equity, and excellence in infrastructure delivery and in critical operations. But Rossana's story goes far beyond just working at a public agency. She's also a leader within the American Society of Civil Engineers, where she's helped empower the next generation of professionals. And she's also the author of the deeply moving book, 26 Seconds, a reflection on personal resilience, purpose, and the human side of leadership to raise awareness. And Rossana and I talked at length about her book and her story and what brought her to be the author that she is now. And I explained how I really enjoyed the details she got into, and we spoke at length about that. Rossana was also nice enough to give me a few gifts, kind of apropos, since it's about airlines, and so I get a luggage tag, and then a little note, a reminder about her book. Hopefully you all can check it out. In this episode, we'll talk about her journey from engineer to executive, and the lessons she's learned along the way, and the powerful story behind her book. So grab a coffee, settle in. We were in Seattle for this episode, so get your Starbucks coffee, I guess, and get ready for an inspiring conversation in this special episode of the Public Works Podcast with Rossana D'Antonio. Thank you very much. Hello, welcome to the Public Works Podcast, where we dive into people, policies, and projects that shape our communities and bring us all together. I'm your host, Shane Silsby, and today I'm joined by an incredible leader in the industry that has touched millions across Southern California and really across the country, and that's Rossana D'Antonio. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Shane. It's great to be here. Thank you.
It's awesome. Rossana recently served as Deputy Director for Los Angeles County Public Works, overseeing one of the largest, most complex public works agencies in the country. She's also a past president of American Society of Civil Engineers, Los Angeles section, and the author of the inspiring book, 26 Seconds, which we'll get into a little bit later. That's a deeply personal reflection on resilience, tragedy, and leadership challenges. So, Rossana, thanks so much for being here today and taking some time.
It's just exciting to be on the show with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, that's great. I should say we are on location in Seattle at the American Society of Civil Engineers National Conference, and we'll get into your roles there a little bit. But if you wouldn't mind starting us off with kind of your journey, a little bit more on the public side and how you kind of ended at Los Angeles County Public Works and kind of how that worked for you.
Yeah, sure. So I actually like to frame who I am by letting people know that I am at heart an engineer. I am a public speaker now. I'm an advocate, and as of a few months ago, I'm a published author. But I've spent 33 years, more than 3 decades now, in public service, ensuring that we improve the quality of life for our communities through safe planning, design, construction, operations, and maintenance of public infrastructure. And most recently, I'm now an advocate for infrastructure investments and aviation safety. So my journey has been in the public sector, like I said, for 33 years. I grew up in LA County Public Works. That is where I served my entirety of my professional career. And my final role at Public Works was as a deputy director, where I led 2 business areas. One was municipal services, which was all about communities, and the other one was about emergency management, which turned out to be one of the most challenging assignments that I've ever had, and very timely, given what we're seeing now with regards to natural disasters and climate change. And then life took somewhat of a little turn. I left the county, left public service, and now I've joined a private firm. So I've joined the dark side for some of your listeners. And now like I said, I'm serving in another capacity. I am all about advocacy now. And now I've taken this journey as an author to get the word out with regards to safety.
For sure, very important topic, and we're going to dive into that more. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your role at Public Works or some of the things that you did at LA County Public Works, because it is the largest county in the country, 88 cities, 11 million plus people. So what were some of the biggest challenges there? Obviously, you've got organizational challenges, you've got community challenges, you've got infrastructure challenges. What were some of the main things that?
Yeah, I mean, LA County Public Works is the largest public works agency in the nation, and we employ over 4,000 engineers and clerical people, administrative type people, field people. We have 6 business lines. We have transportation, water, environmental programs, capital improvement projects, municipal services, and emergency management. So we do the full gamut of public works, and we serve over 10 million residents within LA County, like you said, 88 cities. So we're very, very broad. We have a very large footprint, not only size-wise, but also in the impact that we have in communities. To us, it was all about building trust with our communities, with the people that we serve. Some of the biggest challenges, obviously, are the same challenges that anybody else is facing right now with regards to funding, with regards to not having enough budget for the needs of the communities, responding to natural disasters. Like I said, that is probably one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing now just across the nation. And just being able to navigate some of the workforce issues that everybody is seeing. We are all about partnering with the private industry to be able to move progress with regards to some of our infrastructure. So I would say that as robust as LA County is, the same challenges exist at a different scale. And it's about making sure that we try to overcome some of those challenges. How do we do that? Whether we do it through deferred maintenance, whether we do it through moving people around where the funding happens to be, whether we do collaborations or partnerships or grant seeking. At this point, it's about solving a problem. And what that solution is about, finding the appropriate means to plug a hole.
Sure. And one of the big challenges we saw, these people across the country saw, was with the Los Angeles wildfires coming into an urban environment. And we don't have to dwell on that for a long time, but I just find it's interesting. You were in emergency response, emergency operations as part of your role. And then you were not at the county, and then that thing happens. So you're kind of seeing that, and I know your community was kind of impacted directly. So any thoughts about that? Just kind of a really
I have a lot of thoughts.
interesting perspective. Like you were there, then not, then you see it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so in 2018 with the Wildfire, I happened to be at LA County Public Works. I happened to be the emergency manager, business leader. And so I led. The response is really done by fire and sheriff, but the recovery is something that I'm really proud that I led. Wildfire impacted the Malibu area and surrounding cities. There were over 3,000 structures that were burned. I was evacuated for over 3 weeks, so I was managing this disaster from a hotel room and our department operations center. It impacted my community, obviously, right? And so I got to see firsthand what that entailed at a much smaller scale than what happened now in January, right? So, rebuilding takes time, and it took many years for the scale of the Wildfire devastation. So in January, as I was watching the news for the Palisades fire, I knew that it was on a completely different scale. And I knew I was no longer there. So I was kind of torn between wanting to be there and being able to share what I had learned, just a few years back. But I was also, the magnet of the disaster was such that I was like, I'm kind of glad I don't have that burden to lead, because it was just horrific. And
you had to deal with it from where you were living.
Right.
Direct impact.
Exactly. So that's a good thing. I mean, I live in Malibu, and so while my house was not directly impacted, we did live through the after effects. PCH was closed for over 6 months. We had no access. We had to actually go, through the valley to get into town. We had no running water for a few days. We had a boil water notice. We had no power. Power had been shut off, a few days before. Now, as an emergency manager, I learned to be more resilient at home, which I think is something that individual homeowners need to learn how to do now. And so we had just purchased a full house generator, so I was not impacted in that regards. But many of my neighbors had to leave home because without power for 3 weeks, that's just not livable. And so there were several impacts. Obviously, the internet, you couldn't get Wi-Fi. So, I mean, the impacts were such that it highlighted how some communities, including my own, Malibu, is so not resilient. And the need for us as engineers and professionals in this arena, in this industry, to push for everybody, all agencies, starting from, federal government down to the individual homeowner, to be more resilient. Because at the end of the day, when the next disaster hits, which it will, we can't rely on government. We need to do more for our individual selves. And that's one of the lessons that I think I learned in this particular disaster.
Yeah, that's very difficult. I know I've talked to people over the years that have gone through fires, or they lost their house, or whatever the case is, and it affected them personally their whole lives. They remember that thing happening. So thank you for sharing that. We talked about the challenges or the things that you're working on at the county, and then now you see it from the other side. But anything, just as we wrap your time in public service, that you were really excited about, or proud about, or just felt like that was a great thing you were able to accomplish?
Yeah, one of the things that I think government doesn't get much credit for, and that's the impact that we make on communities. Right now, there's a huge distrust in government, and it's kind of a thankless job. And so when you go into public service like this, you really do it for not the money and not the recognition, but truly the rewards that come from watching you improve the quality of life of the people that you serve. And so I don't, except for the Wildfire, the recovery, which to me had such significance professionally and personally, that's really probably the highlight of my career. I think each and every day gave me an opportunity to see what our work meant to the individual peoples. A lot of our employees come into work and it's all about the widget, getting the plans out, getting the contract out. It's the individual tasks that we do. But when you actually take all of that collectively and you look at it holistically, all of that actually improves people's lives every single day. And I don't know if people actually recognize it. People take for granted their infrastructure, but we don't. We recognize the impact that we have in providing safe transportation, drinking water, the whole gamut of what we take for granted as individual homeowners. And so I can't really necessarily pinpoint anything besides the Woolsey fire recovery. I think each and every day was an opportunity for us to say, I did good, I made someone's life better, and I'm proud of it.
That's great. Yeah. Continual progress, right? Continuously doing good work. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned a few times resilience, sustainability, good practices and processes. As we move over to more of your efforts on the private side, I know you worked probably with American Society of Civil Engineers when you were at the county as well, but since we are at the conference here in Seattle, let's talk about that a little bit. Can you explain a little bit about your role with ASCE? And you started probably locally, then regionally, and now you have a higher role in the organization.
Yeah, so I joined ASCE when I was a student in college, and I ran for the student body government of ASCE. And so it's near and dear to my heart. There are people here say, ASCE made me, because ASCE has given us the opportunity to work at all levels in this organization to give back. And whether we do it through committees or, the actual governance, it shapes us. And so it's given me an outlet to add an additional branch of growth to me as a leader. And 3 years ago, I joined the board, the international board. The ASCE is an international organization. So I joined the board, where I'm one of 18 board members. This is my last year on the board, and so tomorrow I'll be stepping down, and a new at-large director will be joining. And so I've had the opportunity to make decisions at the highest level within the organization. We just approved a strategic plan not just 3 years ago, which set us off in a completely different direction. We are making impactful and transformational changes, initiatives, projects, and policies that align with the challenges of the world. And so when you add that to my time in public service, it just makes it a richer experience, professionally speaking. So I'm excited. We do a lot of advocacy work in Washington, D.C. You've joined us there as well. And we We drive some of our policies and priorities. We are making a difference at the highest levels of government. I just heard a quote. Somebody said the ASCE had been quoted in the news, I think it was like over 1 billion times, within January and today. And it's because ASCE has now been able to prove that we add value. With our ASCE report card, we rate 17 different categories of infrastructure, and now our senators and congresspeople are actually quoting the results of that report card to be able to drive investments in infrastructure. So, it's really exciting to see the ASCE, which what I started out in as a student, is now actually driving change at the global level. And I think it's so needed right now. We need more organizations like this because the challenges that we're all facing, no one can do it alone. And we need advocates, and we need academics, and we need professionals to be able to drive progress in some of these challenges.
And that's great. And you mentioned we partnered on some advocacy efforts in California and at the national level. Can you just talk a little bit more about the infrastructure report card, the frequency of that, how just any agency or any engineers can use that as a way to advocate even at all levels of government?
Yeah. So the ASCE report card comes out every 4 years. It rates 17, the national report card rates 17 different categories of infrastructure. And we use subject matter experts, professionals like you and I who want to join a committee and work together to come up with a grade. And it's a grade just like the report card in school, A, B, C, D, and F. Some of our scores have, overall the score I think was C minus, so we had some improvement. But, no, I'm sorry, it was a C. We had an improvement from C minus, the overall report card. But each category gets rated in and of itself. And depending on the score, it gives our legislators more leeway, more of an argument to be able to say we need to invest in this infrastructure because at the grade that it received. So that's the national one. But each state also does their own individual state report card. And I believe right now, under the leadership of Yaz Imrani, who is over Region 9, there is a report card that is due out in November. And we were talking to him about it last night. We'll be participating in it as a rollout in Sacramento. And so anybody can join both the national as well as the state committees to come up with this report card. And I think everybody should do it at least once in their own field if you'd like, because I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to see how these scores come about and to have, leave our handprint on this document that can then be used by all of us to advocate for more funding for our infrastructure. Everybody needs, from the federal down to the local agency level. And I think it's a tool that has proved to be very rewarding and very effective.
Sure. And it's done every 4 years, as you said, and 2025 is a release. And we worked together to try to push that out in DC earlier in the year. And if I remember correctly, the grades 4 years ago were, C minus, as you said, and then we moved to a C. And part of the advocacy piece of that, I think, was the federal government passed a bipartisan infrastructure law, and so those funding elements into the infrastructure categories, we believe, are what improve those grades.
Correct.
And so now as we go into another cycle or session at the congressional level, at the federal level, to try to figure out what infrastructure funding will look like, report card is another tool to say, look, we had some progress, let's not drop back, right? Let's try to move forward.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It was over $1 trillion that was approved, and many projects have come to fruition because of it. So yeah, it's very exciting.
And when that $1 trillion was approved, now it's not all been implemented through the bipartisan infrastructure law, but when it was originally approved, I think that ASCE's numbers were that we needed like $3 trillion,
right,
for all the infrastructure to get everything up to speed, to get to an A, if you will. So even at $1 trillion, there was still a big shortage there. That's why it's so important to push.
Exactly. This was a good step forward, right? But more needs to be done. We just can't stop. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So ASCE helping advocate nationally and really at all levels for infrastructure funding and awareness, but also it advocates for the profession of engineering. Would you mind speaking a little bit about some of the things like movies produced or other elements?
Oh, sure, yeah.
That ASCE does?
Yeah, so right now we have, just in general, our industry is going through a workforce crisis. We have a lot of people, a lot of needs, especially for all this investment that has come about. We just don't have enough people to actually crank out the projects that need to be done. And so ASCE has taken on a priority to try to encourage kids to join the industry. This is a really noble profession. And we do it through all sorts of creative ways. So one way, you mentioned the movie, we have several movies that we've produced that have been sponsored, big name sponsors like Bechtel. A few years back, I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago, we did the Dream Big movie, which was a huge success and has been rolled out to many schools, elementary schools. And it highlights some of the projects that we do that people don't think about, and that they don't know who creates these types of projects, right? So we're kind of educating not only school kids, but also teachers and even college students as well. And so that was a huge success. And because it was such a huge success, we now did the second movie, which is
Cities of
the Future. I was thinking of Back to the Future. Cities of the Future, which we just rolled. We were at the gala event where it was rolled out last year, I think it was.
The premiere, I think.
Yeah, at the Science Center. And it was a huge success, and that too is now being rolled down in theaters. It's also on planes, I think.
To that point, that's why I knew the name, because I saw it on the plane on the way to Seattle. So
okay, there you go. So it's fresh, yeah. So it's exciting because, it's getting out to the masses, to the people that don't even think about what is civil engineering. A lot of people don't even know what we do. So it's really exciting. So that's just a couple of things that we're working on. That's probably the high profile, exciting, sexy type of projects that we're working on. But also in general, getting into the nuts and bolts, we're working with other national organizations like NCAA, who administers the licensing examinations. We're trying to broaden opportunities for other non-engineers to become registered engineers, so like the engineering technician series and whatnot. So we're working collaboratively with them to help increase our numbers through licensure, because it's so important. And also we are working with NCAA to promote international mutual recognition agreements. So, for example, at the beginning of this year, NCAA signed this mutual recognition agreement. Well, actually, it was the United States signed it with the UK, the United Kingdom, and we are now recognizing the professional certifications from each one of our countries. So if I wanted to become a registered engineer in the United Kingdom, I would go through a very abbreviated process in order to be able to register. They would recognize overall my registration, and they would help me streamline my certification in the UK, and vice versa. And that's been hugely successful. We have 27 states right now that have committed implementing the mutual recognition agreement. And we have, I think, 3 UK engineers that have now become registered here in the United States, and 2 US engineers that have been registered in the UK. So it's beginning to work. And we hope that with that, we'll also be able to increase our numbers in the profession. So it's about working with schools, academia, ABET requirements, trying to find opportunities to streamline some of the education that kids are going through now. The the challenges have changed from what they are today to when you and I graduated from college. But we still have the same curriculum. And is that appropriate? And maybe it is, but we need to be asking these questions and saying, if it's not appropriate, we need to change the curriculum to be able to address the current needs of today. And in that regards, maybe increase our numbers through that. So there's several different spokes in the wheel that we're working on, but those are just a few.
Those are great points, and trying to get people interested in the profession to get them to try to participate at all different levels.
Yeah.
Once people are participating in any level, to help them progress for our leaders of the future, what do you think about, from a mentorship standpoint, how ASCE does some of the formal things? I think there's a session I'll be attending like in a week or something for ASCE in SoCal. Any thoughts on that, or things you've done to help in those areas?
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that I think I am where I am is because I had amazing mentors. And when we think about mentors, I think we kind of get stuck in this whole you need to have kind of like an assigned mentor, in your organization or in your school or in a professional organization. But in reality, for me, it's always been very organic. I've always found people that I've either gravitated to or senior, seasoned professionals who have seen something in me that they thought, well, maybe I can try to help shape and mold those skills. And it's worked out organic. I can look back and I can point out to several mentors along the way that have made a difference in my life. And so because it's worked out that way for me, I try to do the same with the next generation. And ASCE is really committed to helping the younger members to be able to assume some of the leadership roles within the organization so they can be ready later on to assume a much greater role, not only within ASCE, but their organization, their work at wherever their employment. And I'm a strong believer of mentorship. I think that we all, as the seasoned engineer, I don't like to call us seniors, as the seasoned professionals, and experienced professionals, we owe it to the younger members, and we need to pay it back. We need to pay it forward. Because I'm sure every one of us can point to someone who made a difference in our lives. And so it's a matter of, I just used this quote yesterday for a meeting that I had. It's by Gloria Steinem. And it says, it's not about me passing on my torch, but it is about using my torch to light the torch of others. Mm-hmm. And I find that so powerful because that it is about that. It is about helping people that are coming up. They are the future of our profession, of our communities, of our society, and we need to get them ready for their time, which is not far from now.
Right. Speaking of lighting torches, metaphorically, a question here for you. If you could offer one piece of advice to emerging engineers or people in an industry who aspire to lead in public service, what would that be?
Wow, that's a good question. I've never been asked that. In public service?
You've had your public service time. You are doing things on the private side now. You've got industry associations. You've got all these pieces together. What do we say to the next group?
So, you know what? I find the younger members, the younger generation, I find them to be very idealistic. They're different than my generation. And that's a really great quality to have. And with that quality, I think it is prime for going into public service. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think we are all in public service as engineers, whether we work in the public sector, in the private industry, whether we're in academia, whether we have our own company, we are all in public service. I mean, our mission as engineers, as civil engineers, is to protect and safeguard the health, safety, and welfare of the public. By nature, we are trained in school to public service. Whether we actually go into government or not, our profession is designed to do that. We are a very noble profession. We help communities. We build things. We solve problems. And so by nature, we are already in public service. So if anybody asks me for advice, I would say you're already doing it and continue to do it with passion and energy and knowing that you are essentially changing the world every single day.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about kind of that perspective where even through school or whatever, when we do designs or we plan, we're building infrastructure for people we will never meet.
Exactly.
Right? Just the public, the general public. Even if you're on the private side, you're designing for public infrastructure. Even if we're in a building that's semi-private, there's still people in here. That's a really interesting point. Thank you for that. Because of your perspectives, which are great, and your experience, which is great, and your personality, which is great, you're able to take all of those things now and put them into a tangible, bound element, which is a book. And so I wanted to talk about your new book, if that's okay. It's called 26 Seconds. And it's such powerful work. It's part memoir, part reflection, part looking at really difficult challenges, and then part looking forward and calls to actions. I know when I read it, I was really struck or impacted by the level of detail, number one, the emotion in it, right? Number two, because we had worked together a little bit before. You're really authentic in what you're sharing in the book, which is awesome. You do that way better than I could have. So kudos to you on that. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about, I mean, we can talk about kind of what's in the book in a second, but kind of how you got to that point. We know there was a personal tragedy that built this story, but just I have this kind of in my mind, I have these notes, and now I want to kind of put that into something tangible.
Yeah. Again, this also came about organically. I didn't set out to write a book, and by the way, it took 15 years, so there's a lot's gone into it, right? So I didn't set out to write this book. I mean, there was a personal tragedy. My brother was killed in a plane crash. He happened to be the captain of that commercial flight, and what it started out as me writing a whole bunch of thoughts and getting things out as a tool to dealing with grief, I guess. I would just get it out in journals. It was just a dumping ground.
Sure.
And then somewhere along the way, when I learned the news, I just had this suspicion that he would be made a scapegoat, because I don't know if your listeners know, but 70% of plane crashes get blamed on pilot error. And so I just had this terrible feeling that that's where we were headed. And so what I did, I vowed to go out and search for the truth. It was a quest for the truth. That's kind of how it started. It was this mission that I had. And so along the way, some of these musings in my journal began to take form. I took a couple of classes at UCLA, writers classes. I had never written anything except technical reports, right? So I took some classes at the writers program in UCLA, and some of these things started to take shape. And with encouragement from teachers and mentors in a completely new field that I had no experience in, I started to make sentences and paragraphs, and suddenly I had, reams of paper of content, but it was still not structured as a book. And then somewhere along the line, some of my teachers said, you've got some talent here. You can actually write. And with that, I think I was compelled to say, maybe I can write something. I can write a book. Because I knew that the truth, regardless of what the truth was, it would never really come out unless I told the truth. And so that's somewhere along the line, within the 15 years, I thought maybe I can do it. Finding that confidence, in something that I had never done before. I'm not an aviation expert, and so that was something else I needed to overcome. I needed to interview people and analyze technical reports and come up with public information. And so it was truly a journey and several milestones that I needed to overcome that I didn't think I could. And then somewhere along the line, I want to say maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I actually started calling it a manuscript, where it took on form and structure, and working with an editor, I was finally get it across a finish line and secure a publisher. And it was published this year. So
that's great.
It's been a journey.
And real quick commercial, the book is available everywhere you can buy books,
right.
Amazon.
Yeah, wherever you want to buy your books, that it is available there. Yeah, Amazon is convenient, but any local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, online, Simon & Schuster, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it available in a digital format or?
In all forms. So it is physical, digital, audio. So yes, everything.
All right, great.
Yeah.
We have a digital version of it if you just want to show.
Thank you.
I'll try to put in. So there's what the cover looks like.
That's what it looks like. Yeah.
And then the byline on that is?
The byline is grief and blame in the aftermath of losing my brother in a plane crash. So
great book.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to, ironically, I read most of your book while I was on a plane to Europe. It got me thinking about, did I want to come back on a plane, but I didn't really have another option. So just diving into this a little bit, and I wrote a book which is not as good as this, but it was just more technically focused. When I read your book, I was like, wow, this is like real. There's emotion, there's detail. First of all, for me, I sometimes am detail-oriented, but you were mentioning things that people were wearing, things that people were eating. You were describing settings from years ago.
Yeah.
So how in the world did you do that?
Yeah. Well, I've got 2 boxes full of journals.
Okay.
Like I said, my journals were my friend at that point. And they came in all forms. They could just be, spiral pads. And it was actually one of my earlier teachers who gave us this little notepad that was this big for us to take notes. And then it just became necessary. I always needed to have a writing utensil with me, because as I saw things, some things are just ingrained in my mind, that I could relive it like a film. But some of the details, I just wrote them down. It was just so natural. It was part of my communication. It was like talking to yourself, except I was actually memorializing it on a piece of paper. And so those journals are the ones that helped me tap into all these memories that I probably would have forgotten. And then, of course, you supplement, there are gaps, of course, you supplement it by talking to people that lived through the experience with you, my husband, my family, my mom. So yeah, some of those details are just, had it not been for journaling, then maybe it may not have been as rich in detail because of that.
I was trying to think about why I was struck so much by the detail, and maybe it's just because in public service, we write a lot as leaders for an audience that just wants to get to the point, or there might be a legal framework, or you want to say this or that. So it's like, how much info can you put in a compact paragraph just to get it out and give people a quick message, which generally is not interesting. Right?
Yeah, right.
So it's just like to the fact. But your stuff is very interesting because you were able to provide all that context. So did you think about it that way when you were kind of pushing it out as a story of factual events? Or was it just like, well, this is what I have, and so this is what I'm going to use? Or was it a strategy?
I can't take all the credit for that. Like you said, I was trying to write all these reports meant for a professional purpose. And also when I did my research, it got really weedy in technical, all the technical research was in that first draft. And when I worked with my editor, she's not a technical person, she's a writer. And so she's the one that would say, oh my God, she would slash out entire pages of technical work that I had done because she says, this is a memoir. This is not a technical report, and you are not doing justice to the memoir model. And she's the one that would ask me, it was interesting because I thought I was done with this manuscript. Within this last year, she would ask me, how did you feel in this point? What were you thinking? So she asked those deep rooted, poignant questions that as an engineer, I did not have in those initial drafts. And that was awful. That was me that she was asking me to relive the whole thing all over again, which I thought, okay, we're done with that, right? But she sent me down these rabbit holes that actually made me remember some of the emotions that perhaps I had bottled up.
Sure.
And so even as of this year, there was content that came to the surface that went into this final draft, into the book itself, and made it richer, made it more detailed, made it more of a story than just facts,
Sure.
So I think that's the beauty of working with professionals. When you don't know the field, because I didn't know how to write a memoir, working with professionals, they're the ones that actually put the polish on the final product. And I'm so eternally grateful to Jo, who is that editor, because she made it the best version of what it is.
Which is I'm using the term story. It's a memoir. It's a factual occurrence. Without giving away the whole book, because people need to read it, can you just explain kind of real quick the 26 seconds why it focuses on that so people kind of understand?
Yeah. So interestingly, the book was going to call the book Tailspin. It was, in my mind, it was significant because it was, aviation related, and it also signified what my life went into when all of this happened. But when we finally got to the publishing company, they said, you know what, there's more significance in the actual 26 seconds, which signifies the moment of touchdown to the moment of impact. And that's how the book starts, where you actually have this countdown of things that happen step by step in that landing from touchdown to impact. So that's the final, I suppose if you also want to call it the final 26 seconds of my brother's life. And from there, I actually start the story, which is how I learned of the crash. I happened to be on vacation in Barcelona with my husband, and I found out through CNN. I turned on the news, and there was the plane crash, and although they didn't mention his name, we got a phone call shortly after that, and we were told. And then I had to get on 3 different flights and 3 different planes to get home. Then it just tells the story of, the first part is more about the grief, the emotions, the tragedy, getting home and whatnot, the burial. And then from there, it's this mission of trying to find out the truth and digging into the reports and meeting with airline executives and the aftermath of what it is to lose someone in a plane crash, which I now tend to have more of a connection when I see plane crashes and I see people die and I see the families gathered or coming to the accident scene. I have a connection with these people because I know what they're going through, right? People turn off the TV. After a plane crash, you turn off the news and we're done. But the families, that's where the tragedy actually starts. That's where the story starts. And so I, was dealing with getting the remains of your loved ones and the luggage and the investigation and finding out the truth and, the insurance and putting that person's life, in a drawer, right? So I talk about all of that, and then finally I discover the truth. I find a smoking gun. I also bring in other accidents, not just, my point in the story is that my brother's tragedy, that crash, was not an anomaly, okay? It was a sign of systemic gaps in our aviation industry as a whole. And I bring in other examples like the Miracle on the Hudson and Air France and the Boeing's tragedies that happened shortly ago, and I highlight where we have systemic gaps in the industry. We've grown very accustomed, or the industry has been very savvy about blaming the pilot, that last person that touched this complex system, the responsible being for this crash. But in reality, by doing that, we were ignoring all these other safety gaps that were growing, and we weren't aware of it because we were focused here. And so I highlight all that, not with the means to scare people. I still believe that statistically, flying is still the safest mode of travel. Or my mission now is to highlight that the system, this complex system that is aviation, is under great strain. And we're seeing signs of that now in the news, right? I don't think there's a day go by that we don't hear of something happening in the aviation industry. And so as consumers, we should be aware of what those gaps are, and we should demand better of the people in power to keep it safe. If I do that, if I start that conversation, if I can use this story to advocate for aviation safety, then I've accomplished my goal.
That's great. I was going to kind of ask you what you hope the impact will be. You talked about it a little bit, but the relevance of 26 seconds continues to come up, as you say. Early in the year, about when you released your book, we had the incidents in DC airports, right? The crash there and then near misses, air collisions. And then now with the federal shutdown, everybody sees the value and kind of how robust I think people think the system is, and then it's really pieces and parts that are very fragile.
Exactly.
The infrastructure, the maintenance of planes, the pilots, the training, the corporations, how they do business, how people, their traffic controllers. So the whole system, which we take for granted or gloss over, I think that's why people need to read 26 seconds, because you need to kind of know what's going on and what you don't see to raise awareness, to advocate for training, workforce development, better infrastructure, right? Rules, regulations, all those things.
Right, exactly. You get it. Yeah, exactly. Again, this goes back to, just like people are unaware of our infrastructure, we take these things for granted, I think people, passengers, consumers, are unaware of the system that they're using on a daily basis. And as consumers, we have tremendous consumer spending power, and we don't recognize that. I mean, after the crash that you mentioned in the mid-air collision in January with American Airlines and the Black Hawk helicopter, air travel went down. It dipped because people were scared. Naturally, they should be scared. But we should use that knowledge to demand better. And we can do that, through our voices, through our advocacy, especially professionals, but also in being aware of how we spend our money. We can send messages to people in power by just doing that. And that is pretty powerful, and I don't think people recognize that.
Sure, good point. In the report card, one of the categories, right?
Which, by the way, rated a D. So that's not too good.
No.
The signs are out there. We can't say we didn't know.
Yes. So By the way, quick commercial again, you can advocate directly to your legislator. You can just Google or whatever search engine you want, just type in Find My Legislator, put in your address, it'll tell you who your legislators are, your senators, your Congress members. Send them a note. They typically will respond in some way, shape, or form. So, great public sector career, you're doing great in the private sector, great association career, great author career kicking off. I look forward to your next 5 books. So now, at this point, you've given a lot and you've got a lot more to give. So what do you look at for, looking ahead, looking forward, kind of the next chapters for you? What are you thinking about?
So I'm stepping down from ASCE, but I'm still going to remain relevant within ASCE. I am on the public policy committee, so I'll be advocating again for infrastructure investments. I'll be working on report cards. I'll be advocating for aviation safety. So that will always remain because that's kind of a newfound passion that I've got. I'm also on the California Board of Professional Engineers, land surveyors, and geologists.
You were appointed by the governor to that position.
Right. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in 2020 during COVID. And we're all about making sure that we protect the consumers through professional and ethical engineering services. So I'll remain on the board at the pleasure of the governor. So my work continues there. Again, I'm working with NCAA on expanding mutual recognition agreements with other countries internationally. So I'm continuing to work on that. And I would like to write another book, maybe not 5. I would like to write another because the experience was rewarding in and of itself. Now it's just a matter of finding, where the passion lies and sitting down and actually getting to it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being here today. Rossana, thanks for joining us on the Public Works Podcast and for our viewers here to learn about your story, which reminds us that leadership isn't just about managing projects, but it's about inspiring people, building trust, creating hope, trying to raise awareness, all those different things. For our listeners, you can learn more about Rossana and her book right through LinkedIn. You can look what she has going on with a link to 26 Seconds or wherever your favorite books are sold. We talked about that. I'm Shane Silsby. This has been another episode of the Public Works Podcast. And until next time, keep building communities that bring us all together, improving our infrastructure, and trying to do good in the world. One person, one project at a time. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it.
All right. That was an inspiring episode with Rossana D'Antonio, a true leader who shows us how you can have a great career with both technical excellence and using human compassion. Rossana reminds us that leadership is not just about titles or projects, but that you can lead with integrity, empathy, impact, and raising awareness for the public. If you enjoyed our conversation, please share, like, subscribe, tell a friend about what we're trying to do here to spread the word about the public works industry and public service. And I recommend getting a copy of Rossana's book, 26 Seconds, and hearing about her powerful, heartfelt story and the tragedy she went through, and then trying to use that to raise awareness for what's happening in the aviation industry. And you can learn more about her personal journey as well. I'm Shane Silsby. This has been another episode of the Public Works Podcast. Thanks for joining me here in downtown Seattle, and congratulations to the city on their recent completion of their waterfront improvement project.